Bante, good morning.
Good morning.
Great, thank you. Um, I'm interested, I know that you spent many years meditating in the forest, living and meditating in the forest. How did you overcome and manage the inevitable difficulties and challenges um, of living in that environment, and in particular the aversion that is natural to arise from dealing with the conditions around you that are challenging? And in particular, I'm interested in how you manage that during your formal meditation practice.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. So yes, you seem to know already, which is clear from your question, that living in a forest or living in seclusion does not necessarily mean that the mind automatically will be very calm and everything is perfect and you're always completely comfortable. No, that's not necessarily the case. In fact, forests, if you think about silence, probably your apartment or house is much more silent than any forest. Most forests, especially here in Southeast Asia, they're quite noisy. You have crickets playing their music almost the whole day. Some places there are chicken and roosters running around. I particularly recall in Baok, I had a small hut, and the huts are on stilts. And then under the hut, there's also a bit of space, maybe 3 foot high, something like that. And sometimes the roosters, they try to hide from the sun, or they hide from the rain, and they go under the kutis. And it's okay, that's fine. So sometimes they would meditate inside the kuti, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the rooster starts to call, and then the neighbor rooster somewhere else is doing the same, and they play the telephone game, the whole area. And actually the first moment is the worst because you don't imagine, you don't expect it. So sometimes you really startle and can pull you out of your meditation. And these are the moments where the mind has then the tendency to get upset and annoyed. Wow, can we not do something about those roosters? Why like that? And start complaining. And instead of, actually the sound is already long gone, they've already stopped. But the mind still keeps complaining and being irritated about what has happened before. So this is certainly a challenge that every meditator has to face, whether it's roosters or crickets, or the heat, or the moisture, the humidity out in nature, ants coming, crawling all over your body, sometimes ticks. There are certain seasons of the year where small tiny ticks where I stayed would come and would start there and then bite into the skin and will become very itchy. There was a time where I had 90 plus tick bites, 90, 90, at one time. The whole lower part of the body from the feet upward was almost covered every few centimeters, every few inches, a tick bite. And very itchy and unpleasant. So how to deal with all of that? Well, there's one quality that the Buddha mentions often that is very important, which is called khanti, patient endurance. Especially for things that we cannot change and where we don't have much influence over. Patient endurance, what does that mean? Well, there's two ways of being patiently enduring something. One is, and this is maybe what most of us are used to, something happens, but you know you should be patient, so you grind your teeth, but you don't say anything. So it's maybe some level of patient endurance, but actually there's still a lot of inner chatter going on, still aversion going on. And this is actually not exactly the patient endurance that the Buddha was recommending. Lupo Sumedho, he has a rendering of a translation of patient endurance, of khanti, that is very nice. He calls it peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. Peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. And the emphasis here is on peaceful, not just coexistence, but making peace with it, not fighting against it. A sense of accepting, especially things that are outside of our own control, like the Stoics in ancient Greece, who've come up with a whole philosophy of enduring and being patient with things that are outside of our field of influence. And reminding oneself that certain conditions are just what they are, and they're actually not as bad as they seem to be. Like a sound, even in the meditation hall, maybe the neighbor moving a little bit or coughing. Some people get very irritated about that, but the sound lasts only for a short moment. And in the end, it's actually just sound. And the sound itself is actually not even painful. Often it's the story that the mind tells about the source, isn't it? Why are these people not considerate? Well, how can they behave like this? It's these stories surrounding the sound that make the experience so unpleasant. Whereas the sound itself is actually quite soft in comparison. Even these sounds of nature, when you hear birds outside the window, most people don't mind. We perceive them as nice or even interested in listening to them. But actually they can be quite loud. And it's only our sanya, our perception, that labels them, oh, this is a good sound, but then if my neighbor just moves a little bit and makes this squishy sound on the sitting cushion, that's so disturbing. But actually the sound is much softer than the birds and then the roosters. But because we don't have so high expectations of birds and of other animals to be considerate, that's why it's not a big problem. But of the species of animals, of primates, of human beings, we have very high expectations. And that's why the mind gets irritated much more easily. So taking the sound just as sound is one very easy way of dealing with sound distractions and sound disturbances. Another one, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's heat, too cold or too hot. Nighttime can be cool, daytime very hot. Of course, it's always okay also to protect oneself. You can find a bit of a shady place. Normally, even with monks, we have mosquito nets. And in this way, we can also be safe from mosquitoes. So one can usually make some arrangement. And I would say, especially for vipassana practice, the practice where you want to get deeper understanding of reality, of nature, these smaller discomforts do not have to be a major obstacle. In fact, they can be quite useful to experience. Dukkha is one of the greatest teachers. In Thailand, I remember we even used to call the mosquitoes, we call them Ajahn mosquito. Ajahn means teacher. So Ajahn mosquito because they teach us about patience, about endurance, about not being able to get what we want. So I think khanti is one of the most important qualities to deal both with physical discomfort, but then also with disappointment about the mind, the mental qualities. Why is my samadhi so weak? Shouldn't I be enlightened already? So this also, patience is important, as well as when dealing with others. Because others will also sometimes address us in ways that are unpleasant and maybe not even appropriate. But this is again something where we can practice endurance and patience. Not grinding the teeth, but with understanding, with wisdom, maybe even with compassion. and love. But of course, all of that requires practice and regular reminding oneself. You have a choice. Am I going to react with aversion, or am I going to react with equanimity? And just bringing up that moment, that choice, that already helps a lot to reduce the impact of the unpleasant situation. And especially if you can catch it early, the unwholesome state, the anger, the aversion, at that time you can let go of it very easily, usually just by changing your perception, thinking about something else, or paying more attention to the meditation object. But once we allow it to go on for a while and ruminate for 5-10 minutes, then you're getting really deep and a lot of emotions might come up. So it's much better to nip it at the bud at the very beginning. And in this way also, defilements cannot grow so much. Okay? So I offer that for your reflection.